Hello, my name is Robert Fry, and I'm the chairman of McKinney Rogers. I know the British Embassy in Tokyo well, and I can picture exactly where you are today, and I do hope that the seminar is a success. But what I'd like to do is to offer some observations about the events of the 11th of March. Some observations, first of all, as an individual, secondly, as the chairman of a company with very close links to Japan, and thirdly, as a former soldier who has seen various forms of human catastrophe in different parts of the world. But before I do that, maybe just a reflection on the event itself. This was a natural disaster of almost unprecedented severity, but it was then compounded by a technological disaster which was derived from human making. So I think that what the Japanese nation and the Japanese people are confronting at the present time is a crisis of the complexity and depth of which there are few previous examples. It probably is an absolutely unique challenge. But the thing that has become very, very clear to any observer looking at this externally is how well the Japanese people and the Japanese nation have coped with this unprecedented challenge. At the level of the Japanese people, the endurance, the forbearance, and the discipline have been an extraordinary testimony to the qualities of each of you individually. And in terms of the Japanese nation, the strength and the coherence of society has been a message to just about everybody who's looked on to this. If I look at examples in my own life that have some relevance to this, I can think back to the aftermath of the first Gulf War in 1991, when virtually the entire Kurdish nation fled to the mountains which border Iraq and Kurdistan. And I was part of the relief organization that was sent in to try and help them. And it came apparent to me then that what mattered in the early crisis stage of this sort of situation, which I assume you are now through, was that the small things were the most important. It became very clear to me that a single water engineer was worth 10 doctors, because simply getting a supply of good quality drinking water to those people was the best way to prevent the spread of disease. In Rwanda, in the immediate aftermath of the genocide, it was simple prophylactic drugs that would prevent infection and prevented the loss of human life on an even more tragic scale than actually occurred. And in Iraq, in the aftermath of the Second Gulf War, it was the man who could fix a fuse that actually kept the electricity running, the man who actually could maintain a generator that allowed life to become bearable and tolerable in otherwise very, very difficult circumstances. So I think that during the early phase, and your experiences may now bear this out, it is the simple things that really, really matter. In the later phase, in the recovery phase, which is where Japan now is, I think that begins to change slightly. But what you now need to look for is leadership which is characterized above all else by competence. Leadership does not necessarily have to be flashy or inspirational. What it needs to do is to make sure that things work, that creates a situation where a fixity of purpose and a clarity of execution allows the restoration, first of all, of public utilities, then secondly, a capacity for industrial production, and then thirdly, the possibility of resuming your lives from where you left them immediately before the disaster. Now, I think that McKinney Rogers has a few things to offer on this. Mission leadership, the art of getting things done, is what we do as a company of business execution professionals. And I'm sure that Ben and Jin and the others at the seminar today will be saying more about that to you. But I also have one final thought, which is to say that I think that Japan has set a rather baleful standard for the rest of the world. What you have just been through is a strategic shock on a massive scale. And by a strategic shock, I mean an event or a sequence of events that changes the way that we think about our lives as individuals, as companies, and as nations. I think it's one of the characteristics of this century that strategic shock becomes more and more frequent. In the last decade, we've had 9/11, we then had the financial meltdown of 2008, and now we've had the double disaster in Japan. And this is the way that things are going to be in future. Our world is going to be characterized by more and more of this sort of fundamental disruption. And what Japan has shown over the last few weeks, and will continue to show in the future, is the most exemplary way in which individuals, companies, and nations can rise to that challenge. Thank you very much indeed.